Hello again. Welcome back to Print Island. My name is Richard Askam, and I'm joined again today. My guests enjoyed it so much in episode 1 that they've come back and joined me again. Welcome back to Joe Marin and to Ray Weiss.
Hi, Rich.
How you doing, Rich?
I'm really good. Thank you very much indeed. Now, the first episode, we talked quite extensively about the learning platform and really what it is and what it's for and so on and so forth. I want to get a little bit deeper into that a little later on in this episode. But we're going to start to hear a little bit more from you, Ray, about G7, G7 Plus, in fact. And let's assume that somebody watching this for the first time has no idea what we're talking about, and they thought that G7 was a bunch of world leaders that get together once a year and talk about rubbish. But no, you've got a better idea for G7. So tell me all about the G7 Plus program.
And this is where I have to be careful, Rich, because I've been in color management for a long time and I can start going too deep. So I'm going to try to keep it just on the surface. So G7, print methodology to achieve to get accurate color quickly by controlling your grays. That's in a nutshell. G7 Plus builds on that methodology. There were a few things, some people would say there were problems with G7. It really was that G7 was developed primarily for the commercial offset industry. And so other industries said, wait a minute, this is a good methodology. This is working well. So they started implementing it in wide format, screen printing, some other packaging. But there were some things that were lacking. And so G7 Plus addressed those items. Just recently came out in 2024. Time goes by quickly. I say recently, and you're like, that was 2 years ago, Ray, but you're right. In print, things move very slow sometimes. But again, it's a methodology for getting your device up to color quickly and getting accurate color, really primarily by controlling the grays and the overprints. I'm not going to go into it more than that. So there's a certification for experts. So a person like myself can become a G7 Plus expert, or could have been a G7 expert and they're looking to roll over into G7 Plus, but it's also for printing companies like facilities. And what matters there is they're able to say to a brand, for instance, I'm a G7 right now qualified facility, and very soon they'll be able to say I'm a G7 Plus certified facility, which primarily says to that brand, if I know I'm printing with somebody who's using that methodology, whether they're in Rochester, New York, or in Tokyo, Japan, Bangkok, Thailand, if we're all using that same methodology, my color should be the same no matter whom I'm sending it to. And that's what really matters. And I hope I captured it well enough for you in a nutshell and I didn't go too deep.
No, you did. No, that's great. No, you're still in the area that I can swim in, so that's fine. So thank you for that. And you mentioned Japan there, Ray, and obviously you manage international partners for the G7 Plus program across all sorts of markets, very different markets. Japan, you mentioned Mexico, Turkey, India. What would you say is the biggest challenge in maintaining a consistent standard when print culture and business practices vary so much from region to region?
Yes, no, absolutely. And so you're absolutely correct. Some areas are still very focused on TVI, which is tone value increase. It's a way that they're managing color. I'm not saying that's a good or bad way. It's different. And so what we try to focus on is G7 is a methodology that doesn't change. So it doesn't matter where you are, and it's just how do we communicate that? And so if you look at like Japan or Korea, they're really big on standards and precision. That's important to them. And so for them, they get it quickly. They're like, oh yeah, okay, this makes sense. It's how I'm going to make sure I manage my color. In a newer market, we've got to build awareness to explain why color consistency matters. Because if they don't understand why color consistency matters, they don't really want to hear about a certification process. And so we try to explain that, why that matters, but also how, when I talk about the idea of that no matter where I'm printing, if I'm a brand that I'm printing in Japan and in New York and wherever, Africa, that I want consistent color. When the local printer understands that, they get it. They say, okay. And in fact, usually what they ask, the question I get asked a lot, or was asked a lot on this last trip was, so where's the list of those brands that ask for G7? And we know brands that do ask for it. And in fact, I was fortunate enough to be with one of our partners who was traveling with us, and he works for a brand. I can't say the brand, but print quality matters to them tremendously. And so what he always says to any of his partners, I need you to become G7 certified or qualified as a facility. Currently, it'll become G7 plus will be certified. Because then I can tell my brand that I know if you're in that arena, that my color's going to be the same.
Yeah, and I understand from my own background how important that consistency is. The days when I used to work with that well-known soft drinks company from Atlanta,
Yes.
where we had multiple meetings about the color red. Very little to do with the
Yes.
product and the packaging, but all about the color red. And Joe, I think it's that consistency. When you trust in a program like iLearning Plus and like G7, that consistency then becomes second nature, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, I mean, that's really the power of the G7 Plus program and becoming a G7 Plus expert, right? And going through that training. And our industry, it's challenging. We are not, I mentioned in the last podcast, we're in the manufacturing industry, but I might be biased because I've worked in the industry for a long time. But our industry, from a manufacturing standpoint, is the most complex manufacturing process because we're not making the same widget over and over and over again. We're producing different jobs on different substrates um, all day long. Everything that we produce is unique, and you have that layer, and then you have different print environments that vary, different equipment, different customer expectations on what they think is right. Um, and so what G7 Plus and implementing G7 Plus in a production environment does is it helps to standardize the process a little bit, right? So yeah, the training and education and this certification is important.
And that is a key point actually, and I'll play devil's advocate for a moment if I may, Ray, because there's always a lot of conversation these days about whether formal certification matters as much in a world where so much training is available informally online, for example. So, give me your case, make your case for why G7 Plus certification genuinely moves the needle for a print operation.
Well, so I always tell people it creates this common language, right? So when we talk about being G7 plus compliant, we know what that means, no matter where we are. So that there's that. Um, I always and so I own my own print business for a number of years, Rich, and then I also sold for wide format and printing. And I always wanted another arrow in my quiver, I called it. I needed some way to differentiate myself from my competitor, right? So when I'm looking at the landscape, I mean, I was in Washington, D.C., and literally on every corner there was a print shop. I mean, there just was. So how can I set my print shop apart? And I did it by making sure that we did color right so that you knew if you came to us and got something today and you came back in 6 months, it was going to match. And so I look at it as another competitive advantage. And it's really not just about passing a test because that is part of it, right? Or submitting a print that passes the test, the measurement test. But it's making sure that you actually adopt that process control into your environment. Joe mentioned it. We deal with variables. So think about South Florida, humid as all get out, and then where Joe is, in Arizona, where it's incredibly dry. Well, if I'm printing in both of those environments and I'm not careful in managing my environment where I'm printing, I'm going to get vastly different prints. That's a problem. And so if you understand that and you know how to measure that, you know how to control it, you're going to be better than the person down the street who, you're right, informally learned it and they think they know all about color. And when they send the job, it doesn't match.
I can remember, Joe, that's just taken me instantly back to a situation I had probably 10 years ago with a biscuit manufacturer in the UK, cookie manufacturer, and I bought a sample of their product, their packaging, from 4 or 5 different stores, and their whole thing was it has to be our blue, and so I laid these packages out in front of them and said, okay, which one's yours? Because of that different atmospherics, and people don't realize, I think, that you can try and be consistent, but then you have to allow for the variables. Ray's right, isn't he? That there's no 100% perfect, but consistency is the key.
Yeah, it really is. And to your example, when a customer sees that same product with different colors, there's a perception that maybe the quality of this product isn't good, right? It's something that happens subconsciously in our heads. So there's been study after study that proves that shows color perception and how we see things influences buying decisions. And so your example is a perfect example. And that's to that end, there are companies who are G7 master facilities. And so you can earn a certification as a G7 plus expert, but you can actually qualify your facility as a G7 master facility. And there are print buyers, there are brands that they only look for those printing companies that have that qualification, because they know that they can have confidence that if I go and get this printed at this facility that is a G7 master facility, I know that the color is going to be as accurate as it can be.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's hugely important. And Ray, we talked a little bit in episode 1 about building the international business for G7 Plus, and you're working all over the world now and talking to people all over the world in very, very different places and cultures. What does the onboarding process look like if I'm an international partner and I want to become part of the G7 Plus program? How easy is that to do?
Well, I always say the paperwork's the easy part. It's making sure they understand the program, and they believe in it, not just what they think is the revenue potential. And then I've just spent a lot of time with one of our partners in Southeast Asia, and she is clearly a champion for this program. And that's what in my mind, when I'm thinking about who's going to be that next partner, who are we looking for? I'm looking for someone who wants to be that champion, who's going to be thinking about this program. I mean, she came to Orlando last October to our G7 exchange that we conducted there.
Mm-hmm.
And she just caught it. She caught that vision and she said, I want to do this in Southeast Asia. And she pulled it off. Did 3 very different events, but pulled it off. And so what I'm thinking about now is, who are our new partners going to be? Like, we're looking for partners in Europe. We're looking for partners. We have a partner in MENA, Middle East, North Africa,
mm-hmm.
but we're always looking for more, because I think to myself, in those areas, there's a lot of potential language and cultural barriers. So I wouldn't want to try to find a partner in one space that would not want to go into another area to work because of those barriers. So I might need to find 3 or 4 to pick up a small area, but that's what we're always looking for. And I think to myself, what I'm looking for is someone to refer. So, hey, I know of this person. I think they would be a great fit, because that's where it starts. As opposed to when I was doing sales, Rich, cold calling was the worst, right? Having a referral was always the best way to find that next partner. And then we've built branding guidelines. We have a whole onboarding packet. So that's the easy part. It's finding the right partner is the harder part in my mind.
That's a really good point. And I guess that's where, and we said it before, didn't we, in the previous episode, that advocacy and peer recommendation, I think, is probably the most valuable thing. You have to have Domino 1. obviously,
Right.
in order to get Domino 2. But, you're way down that track now, Joe. And I guess, it's a question now to a certain extent of which direction do you want to push those dominoes in?
Yeah, and it's it's not a question of just online or just in person. Like the events that Ray was at in Asia, those were all in-person events. We've got another in-person event, year number 2 of the G7 Plus Exchange at Printing United Expo in Las Vegas in September. So we're going to have a half a day of training there. Um, so we're trying to balance what we do in person with what we do virtually and make those two work together. And that's what Ray's building through the International Affiliate Network. And yeah, it's an interesting time. How we work and learn has changed tremendously over the past 20, 30 years. We've got to make sure that what we offer is um, current and relevant, and I think we're doing a good job of that. Um, I think that the other thing is and I think the thing that companies need to keep in mind when it comes to their employees, you just don't learn something and then that's it, you're done. You work, you learn, you work some more, you learn some more, you work some more, you learn some more. It's a continuous process throughout one's career, and that's why iLearning Plus and the certifications like G7 Plus exist.
Yeah, absolutely, and they work so beautifully together, Ray, as well, don't they? Because there's what I would call a clunk. There's no, there's a seamless relevance between both sides of that, and even whether that's online or whether that's in person, that they just don't compete with each other, do they? They complement each other.
No, absolutely. And when that was one of the messages I brought to Southeast Asia because they were a little reluctant to help translate content for iLearning because they saw it as competition. And what I told them was, you know what, really, it's going to create a funnel. So they're working to help us to translate our Print 101 course and then our Color Management Professional Fundamentals. Again, a little more introductory, but foundational courses that then the next logical stepping point would be to think about an in-person G7 Plus training. So it really is, they complement each other. Those courses they're easily done online. You go through them and you can catch those concepts. Then when you show up at an in-person training, you're going to learn faster and better because you have that foundation, as opposed to walking off the street cold and trying to pick up this G7 Plus concept and you're struggling and you're just battling it. Then we can focus more on even expanding what we offer in person. So like a follow-on workshop maybe, so that once you've done the G7 Plus training, then we come put together an event to show you how do I actually put it into practice. And that was shared with me by one of our instructors. And I thought, you know what, that really makes sense. How do we keep moving that needle forward?
And I think both of these programs, Joe, show the fine balance and the necessity to a certain extent of what we lovingly call continuous professional development. But as a business, if there's a day when you stop learning, that's when the risks start coming in, isn't it? So this needs to be continuous.
Yeah, the best companies use training, education, certifications as part of their quality strategy, right? And they don't view this stuff as a one-time event, but as a continuous process. And we see that the industry leaders who invest in this continue to be the industry leaders.
Yeah, well, there's a clue there, isn't there? I think everybody will spot. So listen, thank you both again for taking time out on this episode. I'm going to get you back on Print Island as the weeks and months roll on, and we'll get a little bit deeper into this. I sense that Ray wanted to get deep down into the weeds of this, so we're gonna let him at some point. But for now, I think you've done a great job of explaining really what it's all about, what it's for, who it's for. One last thing before you both go, I want you to give me a prediction. Let's have a look 5 years out from now at both of these platforms, both G7 Plus and iLearning Plus. What do you expect to see? Joe, what's your prediction for the future?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that what we're going to see is I think that there's going to be more, shocker, um, AI built into learning and training. I think that what you see in iLearning Plus today is going to be enhanced with AI, where you're going to be able to have conversations about what you're learning. If you choose to go deeper into a particular topic that's being presented in iLearning Plus, I think you're going to be able to go deeper by leveraging AI. So that stuff to me is really exciting. And then I also see us continuing to grow the platform to build out those learning paths that are specific to specific industry segments. So in 5 years, I would love to see us have a full-blown screen printing learning path, a full-blown packaging learning path, a full-blown textile learning path. So Ray and I talk about it all the time. We've got big plans. It just takes time to build that.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And Ray, apart from buying some new headphones so that we don't have to listen to that clicking noise anymore, what do you what do you see down the track 5 years from now?
Uh, mainly I see more partners, more international partners. I think you're going to see a much wider global reach because we're going to build out that group of partners. And the other thing I think, and this is sort of back towards iLearning, you're going to see more courses in many more languages because it just makes sense. It's the best learning is learning in your native language, right? I mean, I'm not saying that someone can't learn, they're in Thailand and can't learn it in English, but they're not going to learn it as well as if they learned it in Thai. And so that's my goal, is to try to internationalize our online learning and then grow our list of partners that are helping plant our flag in more areas of the world. And I really do see that happening.
Yeah, no, I agree. And somebody once told me that if you want to speak a different language, you have to think a different language.
Yes.
And so it's quite hard to learn in a language that isn't yours. So I think that's a very valid point, and something that we can all look forward to. So listen, gentlemen, thank you so much for taking some more time to join me here on Print Island. I think I'm starting to learn more about what you guys are up to, and hopefully the viewers and listeners to this podcast will do too. So for now, thank you both for your time, Joe Marin and Ray Weiss.
Thank you, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
And we'll see you sometime soon here on Print Island. Thank you.